this takes it all the way back to what are we trying to do as a company?
The whole premise is, what's the objective? What is success? How do we know we're winning? And how do we measure that?
Just because your team or your company has always done something a specific way doesn't mean that's the way you need to do it going forward.
What we're seeing at scale these days is all of a sudden your business model changes, or your delivery methods change, or your customer base changes, or all of the above, and now all of a sudden all those people that you hired, they don't have anything to do.
Welcome to Primal HR. Real people, real talk, real HR. The human side of work from the people who live it every day. Here are your hosts, longtime HR leader Terry Smith and People First strategist Leslie Lulham.
Hey there, welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of Primal HR Podcast. My wonderful co-host is Leslie, and I'm Terry, and I also want to put in a quick plug for our producer Tim, who makes all this happen. Our topic today is rethinking work and skill-based hiring, and as part of that whole discussion, we thought a good case study might sort of bring this to a very, very clear perspective. So we're going to talk about Blockbuster Video and Netflix.
Raise your hand if you still have your Blockbuster card.
As we all know, Blockbuster and Netflix started out essentially in the same business, renting DVDs, right? And
VHS.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, VHS. That's
got to take it back.
I guess so. Sorry, my bad. But somewhere along the line, things changed. People consumed movies and videos in different ways than they ever had before. It became a very different world, in the start of the 21st century. And so as the model of online consumption and streaming and video production became more and more prevalent, one of those firms adjusted. They changed what they were doing. They went from delivering VHS and DVDs to streaming and delivering over the web. That would be Netflix. The other group, Blockbuster, never made that transition. The reasons are well beyond the scope of this conversation, but they just never made the transition. And so Netflix, as we know, is a worldwide operation now, and making their own films and winning awards and doing all the stuff that we know that they do. And Blockbuster has a store in Bend, Oregon.
And so how does this tie into rethinking work and skill-based hiring? And I think this example is perfect. Just because your team or your company has always done something a specific way doesn't mean that's the way you need to do it going forward. And this takes it all the way back to what are we trying to do as a company? I will say it is frightening to me how hard it is for some companies to set goals. When you ask, what are we trying to do here? And you get 4 different answers, or the metrics aren't visible. Employees want to see how their progress is achieving the KPIs. I've worked at companies all across the board. Radical visibility, zero visibility, goals that changed every other day, goals that never changed for years. You really have to start at the what are we trying to do here? And it's not what roles do we need. It's what are we trying to do as a company?
Exactly. The whole premise is what's the objective? What is success? How do we know we're winning? And how do we measure that? That then leads us to what do we need to be able to do to accomplish those things? And what we need to be able to do are certain sets of things. What are those things that we need to do? That then starts the conversation around what skills do we actually need in the organization in order to grow, change, adapt, thrive, and be successful. And that's probably the biggest stumbling block, is understanding what it is that we want to become, what it is that we are going to be that demonstrates the success that we want.
I think this is such a smart and interesting way to go about team planning, because it used to be, hey, we're hiring 4 of these roles, 4 of these roles, 1 of these, and that's going to help us make more money. I'm going to make it very generic. But what if that team didn't need 4 sales reps and a couple of assistants? What if what the team actually needed was automation to make their sales team work faster and more efficiently, but you're throwing sales reps at it? That's not going to get you the same outcome. So when you're looking at rethinking your staffing and rethinking skills-based hiring, you're going to take the job titles out of it, and you're going to look at skills and the things that you need in order to accomplish the goals that aren't people. And then you can re-look at your team and say, who has those skills? What if they have the wrong job title? Doesn't matter. We can fix that. And then you can look at what's left. Maybe you need somebody who is good at data. Maybe you can't see your progress because the data isn't there. Okay. Then you know you need someone who can do data. What kind of data? And you kind of back into it that way from an objectives and outcomes standpoint versus I have 4 recs I need to fill.
And that's a mantra in so many companies. I have this many recs I get to fill, right? The budget gets approved. Hey, I got 4 recs. I better go fill them right away before somebody comes along and takes my recs away from me. I've seen that conversation so many times. And it's emblematic of an organization that's not thinking necessarily about the skills that are required to get them from point A to point success. It's thinking about, how do I fill boxes and how do I make sure that I have the resources that I think I need, when in fact I may not really understand what those resources are. You know, I've worked in software development companies where it's kind of the same thing as what you described with salespeople. Oh, we have this project and this project and this project that we need to add to be able to create this, set of applications and this set of activities, and so we need to hire some more software engineers. Let's go get some more engineers, right? Let's get them. And then, lo and behold, and this is what we're seeing at scale these days, is all of a sudden your business model changes, or your delivery methods change, or your customer base changes, or all of the above. And now all of a sudden all those people that you hired, they don't have anything to do. And they don't have real work that will forward the momentum. Now, that leads to a lot of very, very hard conversations, which we've talked about in other episodes. But the point is that if the organization was actively pursuing a model of hiring for skills required and hiring for objectives to be met, I think it winds up being a different conversation. And ultimately, it winds up being a conversation that is hopefully more proactive, hopefully more thoughtful, and hopefully not as traumatic when you get to the back end of the conversation and you have to undo all the things that you did because you weren't thinking about these things to start with.
At minimum, re-review your job descriptions.
At minimum.
And I know. Whenever I ask someone to write a job descriptions, I inevitably get grumble, grumble, grumble. It takes too long, grumble, grumble. Hey, we have AI for that now. It works. We've talked about that in another episode if you want to go check it out. But if you know you need a dev, but maybe you need a dev and you are also going to hire an AI person, can you hire an AI engineer? How can you fix the gaps holistically versus hiring one bespoke person for that? And another part to this is, what can AI do and what requires a real human to push the button? And I think we're seeing this across the board right now. Companies are pushing AI really hard. And perhaps, in my opinion, maybe a little too fast in some cases where they're putting the cart before the horse. So when you take a skills-based hiring approach, you map out first what can AI handle and what does a human need to do. And if you need that bridge step, then what do we need to hire a human to build? And be honest about that transition too.
That is a core issue right now with many organizations. They're trying to understand how they can actually apply the AI to make it work in a way that adds value and doesn't detract, and at the same time try to figure out, what are my real human requirements? What skills do I actually need? And do I know that far enough in advance to be able to make long-term commitments for employment? We don't know that yet. I don't think any of us in HR or anybody in corporate executive leadership have really the slightest notion of what that looks like even 6 or 12 months from now.
And I think company size and state also have a huge bearing on this, right? When you are an enterprise level company with a whole bunch of board members and investors, You have to be able to tell them what's going to happen in 3, 5, 10 years. And so whether or not you can, that's a whole other story. But you're kind of approaching hiring, I would say, a little bit differently than a smaller company or a startup who are expected to be able to pivot quickly, a la Netflix, to adjusting market demands. And like, how does that impact your staffing? If you're in HR at the executive level at a huge corporation, how are you going to approach hiring knowing that there's a huge fluctuation coming versus a startup where it's kind of just a white-knuckled thrill ride the whole time? And yeah, I've worked in startups for most of my career.
Too. It's an interesting point because Netflix probably went through that very thought process. Once they really started, you used a great word, pivot, where they started to pivot towards a different model of delivering value to their customers, they probably went through an exercise of saying, the skills that got us here are not necessarily the skills that are going to get us there. Maybe some of them are, but not necessarily all of them, right? And so they probably had to go, I wasn't there, but they probably had to go through an exercise very much like that where they said, okay, these are the skills that we have to get us from here to there. And they're different from the skills that got us to here. In some cases, maybe many cases. And so then it became a matter of once we now understand that, now let's start to build on that foundation of skills, right? And as we start to diversify our business and start getting into things like live production and so forth, whole different model, whole different set of skills and abilities and requirements, right? But they had to start with that fundamental change of, we're not in the storefront delivery process anymore. We're not in the mail order process anymore. That's not our business model. Now that we know that and we've accepted it, now we start to think about what we have to do from a capability standpoint to get from here to there.
Exactly. And I think the crux of it is, and I love this quote here, what happens when HR stops designing jobs and starts designing work?
Fascinating, isn't it? It's a completely different game. You talked about job descriptions a minute ago, right? In that model, those become very antiquated, almost dinosaurs, right? Because they are job descriptions. They're not descriptions of work.
Wouldn't it be interesting if we all went into scope of work versus job description?
Yeah.
I'll let the listeners noodle on that one for a minute. But so what is the workflow? To sum it up as we come up to the end of the episode, it is define the department's outcomes from the operating plan or the company goals or whatever you want to call that. Assess the people by their real capabilities and interests, not legacy titles. Separate tasks into what can AI do, what can it assist with, and what remains distinctly human. And then fill gaps with a hire, a training, a contractor, or a better tool. And I think Terry and I are going to be talking about AI and tools and how that helps with HR compliance. So if you want to learn more about that, listen to our next episode.
Well done. Very nice.
Thanks. I do what I can over here, just trying to make Tim proud.
That was beautiful.
Stay connected with us on social. We're at Primal HR Podcast everywhere.
Questions, topic ideas, workplace confessions. We're here for all of it. Hello at primalhrpodcast.com.
You've been listening to Primal HR. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Primal HR Podcast. Show notes and more at primalhrpodcast.com. Got a topic or want to join us on the show? Reach out. Our email is hello@primalhrpodcast.com. We'll see you next time.